right, everyone, we are going to go ahead and call to order the Recreation Committee with myself and Mr. Van Hoosen present. Mr. Coolman will not be here today. If we can, please say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Saying that reminds me of my 6-year-old who, when we're doing the Star Spangled Banner, started singing the Pledge of Allegiance because he saw everyone turn around with their hands in their hearts. So, just a little fun fact. With that, we have the approval of the minutes from September 13th. Is there any objections?
None.
Hearing none, we'll consider those approved. Next item on our agenda is Wood County Park District grants. Rob, are you presenting that today, or?
Rob's here if you have any questions.
Gotcha. No, got it.
So as you're aware, each year the city of Perrysburg applies for a grant from, well, actually we applied for 3 grants from Wood County Parks District. There's a less than $5,000 grant, there's a $5,000 to $10,000, and a $10,000 or more grant. Last year they awarded us a grant that partially paid for the ADA compliant kayak launch that is going in at Hood Park, I think tomorrow. Actually, in the past, it's paid for sunshades in parks, various other things like that. This year, the applicants we are requesting or applying for and hoping to get potentially under the $5,000 one, the purchase of 4 additional Riverside Park trash receptacles because there's been such an increase in volume at Riverside Park and we need additional trash receptacles. Having gone out and looked for estimates, the cost of that would be $4,690.76. In the between $5,000 and $10,000 grant, we are requesting hopefully for 8 Woodlands Park picnic tables, 6 traditional and 2 ADA compliant picnic tables to replace the aging tables at Woodlands Park. The total cost for all of the tables is $9,900. And then in the excess of $10,000 grant, we're asking for a matching fund so that we could purchase sunshades for Rivercrest Park over the 8-fan bleachers at the 4 fields to protect individuals from the sun. The total cost for the whole thing there is $53,715. We're requesting half as part of this grant, $26,857.50, and then the city would match the other half if awarded.
I know PrAC at the last PrAC meeting came with some suggestions for some grants moving forward, so hopefully that's something we can take into consideration. They found a lot of needs from visiting the parks as often as they do. And so I hope that's something, I know this one wasn't necessarily, this wasn't something they had at the time when the grant conversation came up, but some of these actually did match what they were brought up in discussion as well.
So I'm curious, the shades at Rivercrest, are those over the bleachers on all, there's bleachers, there's 2 sets of bleachers on each field. Are they over all 8 of those?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you skipped over.
I realize that I'm going to come back to the citizen concerns. I came to that in my case of checking off stuff with the citizen concerns, so I'll be coming up next. Any objections with moving this forward? Okay. All right, there's no objection. We'll move that forward 2-0. Thank you, and I do apologize for missing citizen concerns. So I'm going to bring that up in my case to check off everything. I did check that one off, so I know we have a few people here for some citizen concerns.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Condon. I reside at 221 Crandon Drive in Perrysburg. My wife Lisa and our son Noah as well. I've been a resident of Perrysburg for a little over 20 years. And my reason for being here this evening is to discuss a petition to name the outdoor recreation tennis courts on behalf of Al Raba. I sent information to Jonathan by way of email. I know I'd like to share it with each of you. Here.
As you're passing it on, I know I have been in conversations with the administration on this as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
We were actually meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, and you get to see where it all
Yes.
started. I'm looking forward to it.
And I know you are now.
As far as our reasons for being here, Al has been an educator, has been a coach, has been a mentor, and has pretty much befriended most everybody that's come through the junior high halls since the late 50s. Al came to Perrysburg by way of New York City. And in his area, there really wasn't tennis. It was basketball primarily, and that was Al's sport. Al eventually migrated his way west, and with a stop in Barberton and unrelated type pursuits until he enrolled at Bowling Green State. And he was going to try out for the basketball team, and the coach had already had his team in place and had suggested that he give tennis a try. And Al's been playing tennis for the last 65 years. As the information in front of you outlines, Al, at the age of 89 in 2019, wrote 3 articles for the Perrysburg Messenger Journal, which pretty much paraphrases that which I just mentioned. His odyssey from New York City to Perrysburg is a wonderful story. But he's one of those people that you can't help but like. He's very approachable. I always look at him as kind of like the Kevin Bacon of Perrysburg. Everybody knows Al 1 or 2 people removed. And he's 92 now. He's been happily married for 66 years. He's not in the greatest of health. But I honestly believe, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't, that he's deserving. I am one of his 3 sons-in-law. I've known Al for a quarter century, and he is a father to me. I lost my father in late August, but Al has always been a good man and has always counseled me when I've had troubles. So with that being said, I'd like to defer to Deborah Bourne. Thank you.
I think that Jeff said it so well. I don't know if I could really follow it up, but I can tell you that I've been friends with Al since 1975. He's an excellent guy. He's done a lot for this community. I would like to see the tennis courts named after him and all the things he's done in this community for it. It goes without saying, he's a wonderful guy, and let's recognize him, and I would like to see it done as soon as possible. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cindy Michael-Ajeski. I'm also a lifelong resident of Perrysburg. I was inducted into the High School Hall of Fame for tennis along with Mr. Raven. I felt less than deserving. I started playing tennis at the Muni at the age of 6, where he was an instructor for at least 30 years, and he was always there. Not only did he teach the kids that registered, he'd pull kids off the park, hand them a racket, and say, go hit. He was an advocate for the sport. He had a mom's clinic. I know many women today that still play tennis because of the mom's clinic that he taught, and he probably taught hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people how to play at the Muni courts. I think every child or adult that he taught would stand up here and say they couldn't think of anyone more deserving to have the courts named after. He really influenced a lot of people and made a difference.
You mind if I sit here?
That's fine.
My name is John Orser. My address is 125 East Front Street in Perrysburg. I'm a lifelong resident of Perrysburg. I first met Al Reva in 1958 when he came out here on his safari from New York. And I remember him as coming over to our house and playing tennis on the court that my father had. Then I got to know him through the club system. I was out of the Perrysburg schools by the time he was really there. But I want to emphasize that if, in addition to his work with the schools, he worked throughout the community. He worked with clubs, he gave lessons, he also helped out people, helped out as a player when a player was needed. And I think if there's anybody in Perrysburg who should deserve the title of Mr. Tennis, it's Al Reva. And I would strongly encourage you to proceed forward on this and rename the courts for Al Reva.
Just a couple questions. When we talk about the Perrysburg tennis courts, we're talking about the ones at Rotary Park, correct? Municipal Park. That's why I asked the question.
Sorry, near the municipal pools.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure I knew which ones.
That's where he spent his.
But those have changed a little bit with pickleball courts,
Right.
so it's not quite what it was.
And he was instrumental in bringing that as well. That's part 3 of the articles.
Understood.
Thank you.
And I know his close allegiance with the schools over the years because he was teacher, coach for the schools. Does anybody know whether the schools have a plan to have their own set of tennis courts? Do we know whether that's, and because when we name it, there probably won't be 2 of them. That's the only reason I'm asking. We don't know that, do
I think
we?
it is in the plans.
No.
They're currently playing at the Perrysburg Tennis Center.
Yes.
Okay. And I don't believe there are any
Okay.
plans
Just wanted to confirm.
to build any.
They do play at Rotary also. The high school kids do play some matches. at the
Yes.
Rotary program.
But this is for a municipal district. Okay.
Which would be for the whole community as well.
Thank you. Any other citizens? I know Karen, and then we'll come back to you guys if that's all right. In the back, if you want to.
You want me to go?
Yeah, if you
Okay,
want to.
sorry.
That's all right. I know there's a lot of people with concerns, and so I
Yeah.
apologize.
I will go fast. Karen Fleming, 26835 Mohawk Drive, Perrysburg. Just to tag on to that, I learned how to play tennis by Al like 25 years ago. He's awesome. If you met him, you'd love him. So that's a great job. Thank you for doing that. So moving on to pickleball. I have been in contact with City Council just wanting to start a conversation about the signage at the park. The signs currently say 1 game limit, which is pretty challenging to follow. A pickleball game lasts, you can play 10 to 15 minutes. So to load your family up, go over and play 15 minutes, get off the court, and then have to wait to get back on. You just don't ever get into a groove, you don't ever play. The other issue that I kind of see with that is not everybody knows how to score a game or play a game. They might not, it's a new sport, people are just learning it. So if you're out there and you don't know how to score, you might not ever know when 1 game is up. So I feel like a universal, everybody knows time. There should be a time limit, like tennis courts. I'm not saying it has to be an hour, a couple games, half hour, 45-minute time limit, whatever it is. But just more of a conversation to understand that 1 game of pickleball is pretty fast. And I just think that's a conversation that needs to be had. My other thing was the rotational play system, and I've had conversations about that with, I emailed City Council, just that the rotational system of being coerced into trying to play with other people. You get off the court and then they want you to feed into their group. Like when my kids are in town and my adult children want to come back and play pickleball with me, I certainly don't want to split up and not play with them. I want to play with them and I want to play for more than 10 minutes. And they're public courts, and I just feel like the signage should be reflective of the whole community, that everybody gets fair use of the courts. And that was all I had to say. Thank you
I
for
know the
listening.
administration has, and Mr. Ross has had some conversations. What was the organization that you've talked with them?
We've talked with 2 of the USA pickleball ambassadors, local ambassadors.
And I know some of the signage was looked at possibly being changed. Has that been determined at this point, or what we're looking at?
We are looking to, they're actually are reviewing our signage. Some of the rules that were on there were COVID related, so those are being moved. But they did indicate to us that the 1 game rule is a standard rule, that the 3 game rule or a time limit of an hour, that's more in tournament play. So they said that consistently it's a one-game rule on the courts that public courts that are around. So we're focusing in on that. And then we're also focusing in on talking to 2 specific groups who tend to have unorganized but organized events at public courts, to impress upon them the fact that there is not tournament play, there is not organized club play on these courts, that it's one game per group, and you rotate in, you go to the back of the line, and you rotate through, so that there's not that rotational play where people are forced to rotate into some other group's play. So we're gonna have those conversations. One of them is gonna be this Friday.
Can I say something? My concern with that is, I think that's a lot of expectations of the general public, again, to know how to play the game, how to score a game, and how to end a game. And if you're trying to teach someone, so I've been playing for years, and I've been trying to teach people to play. Everybody wants to play, it's the hot new game. You can't teach someone in 15 minutes and then get off the court and then come back on. I know, I actually just avoid playing between 9 and 11 every day, which is kind of like the best time to play because the courts are crowded. So I go in the middle of the afternoon when it's not crowded, but there are times when you can only play when it's, between 9 and 11 in the morning. So.
Do we experience a similar situation with tennis itself? Time frames, rotations?
Even back when tennis was way more popular, you knew if you went, you would just say, how much longer do you have the court? Oh, you've got it for 20 more minutes? You do something for 20 minutes, it just was never, that's my own personal experience. I never had issues with, but I didn't play tennis as much as I played pickleball, probably because my kids were younger at that time. So I'm just trying to.
I was just comparing the standards of.
Oh, the standards. Tennis is 3 games, 1 hour.
So it is a 1 hour versus
yes.
15, okay.
And that's what the signage says. So if you walk onto the pickleball courts, going through the tennis courts, or if you use the temporary courts on the tennis courts, if you read that signage, it says 1 hour, 3 games. But then if you come in the other sides, it's got different, if you do back there, so it's different. So there's just a lot of confusion and, animosity when you get there. I'm like, it's supposed to be fun and just go and play pickleball and hang out,
Hopefully we can look at, once we talk with those other entities as well, and see what about this signage and what we can do.
Right. Just wanted to start the conversation. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Any other citizen concerns?
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. We are Jay and Jan Nielsen. Where do you go? There he is. 103 Wentworth Court in Perrysburg. Been in Perrysburg for about 30 years. We started Missions International of America in 2004 and opened the Brad Reddick School in 2006. Right now we have about 300 children in our school. The school is named after Brad Reddick, who many people know was a beloved member of the community before his death in 2004. We're coming before your committee tonight because we have heard through the grapevine that the park at Woodland, which is about half a mile from our house, the Children's Fort Imagination is going to be torn down. And my dream has always been to have a wonderful playground for my children in Haiti. Our location is in the middle of a desert. Our children will never have seen a playground before, and I think it would just be such an amazing thing. So we would just like to start a conversation about the possibility of perhaps us being able to have some of the parts of the playground when and if it's being taken down.
Hopefully that's something probably directly to the administration at this point in that conversation. I'm not sure what the.
And I do have some feedback to hand out tonight on some of your other items, and this one is kind of addressed at the beginning of the document I'm going to hand out.
So for the replacement, because that's next on the agenda, so why don't we
It
just
is
bring
more
that up?
so the notion of having a nonprofit remove playground equipment versus the actual status of the project. But if you'd like me to talk about both, I can certainly do so.
Since that the playground's on here, why don't we just bring that up now? That's all right.
And I will hand these two down to Councilman Smith, or you and Councilman Van Duzen. And I'll certainly send one to Councilman Coleman it was disposed at the moment. But the actual status of the playground replacements at all 3 parks, we're currently about 3 weeks out from knowing the shipping date on that equipment from the contractor. And given the time frame that we're now in and how the evenings are getting cool and even some of the daytime temperatures are cool, Bicentennial is going to be the first playground out of the chutes that we're looking to actually do the replacement. We were hoping that we could have a tear down and a installation before the end of this year. That is not looking optimistic at this point because the temperatures have to be above a certain temperature for the poured-in-place rubber to be installed. And they will not tear down a structure if they do not have the flooring to put back in place because of hazards that have occurred in past projects. So at this point in time, it looks like all 3 parks will be completed in the spring of the year. And they are, I think, required to be completed, Mr. Ross, I think by the end of June, if I'm not mistaken, per the contract. And the contractor currently has in their contract that we bid out the demolition of those structures. So when we talk about having an entity come in, a nonprofit come in and remove a structure from city property, there are certain concerns that have been relayed to us by the playground manufacturer. Some of it has to do with the fact that if a nonprofit comes in and removes a structure, it simply can't be literally, using a sawzall or anything and cutting off the metal poles. They would need to be able to physically remove all the infrastructure that's below ground, anchoring those structures in place. Legally, from a legal standpoint, and our law director has to research this, but the legal department from DWA Recreation indicated that they've been involved in lawsuits where the city could have liability if we give that playground equipment to a nonprofit that could have any structural issues once it's removed. We could be liable if a person is injured due to sharp metal edges, creased metal tubing, peeling of the non-slip surface, etc. And we've also been told by this entity that we could be liable for equipment installed incorrectly by non-trained individuals if an individual is injured on that equipment because of the incorrect installation. That is something our law director is adding to her list of research items, some from earlier today, some from earlier tonight. But there is a concern about what that actually means. City Council can certainly donate items through the passage of resolutions, I believe, Ms. Andretto, versus an ordinance.
City determines that any property is no longer necessary for the city, just like we're donating heart monitors. You have the power to donate property that we are otherwise disposing of. You have to do it by a resolution, but yes, you can do it.
So how would that be any different than doing a playground legal aspect of it? That's, I don't understand.
I have to ask Ms. Sandretto to take a look at that.
Can I comment on both of those?
I think
First of all,
I think the difference is that you don't have to tear the heart monitors out of the ground or dismantle them or anything to donate them. So I think the legal concern, and I have not researched this yet, just so you know, I was given this tonight as well, is whether or not there's a liability because the equipment is being taken apart and then put back together.
But if it's not taken apart, put back together by us, I don't see what
It would
the.
be put back together in Haiti, and that's not, that's not a legal concern in Haiti.
I don't know if a Haitian in my community would understand the world court to come and get you, But from the point of view of taking it out of the ground, taking a sawzall to it would completely destroy it. You need every bit of the height that's on those pipes. You'd want to come in with a small backhoe and take 2 cuts and drop the post over and bring in an electric air hammer and take all of the cement off of the pipes. If you lost that height, it won't assemble correctly. So that's not, nobody, only if you're destroying it would you want to cut it off the ground level.
Well, and we wouldn't probably be interested in the entire facility as well. There are just certain pieces on it that would be really helpful for us. We have a company that did donate some parts of a playground for us, and we're hoping to expand that.
With the same construction.
And it's the same construction as Woodland Parks is, as Fort Imagination is. So we wouldn't be interested in the entire structure, just some of the parts of it.
Wouldn't keep me from taking it all down, though.
Right, sure.
It's easy enough to put a team together and take it apart.
So the way we have it currently structured, DWA would
Correct.
be the demolition company.
Yes, they are contracted by us through the bid process to remove that equipment. And what we don't know at this time is that there was an expectation of salvage for the metal for those structures.
So that's another thing we have to clarify.
Correct.
Because I'm just supposing that if they actually removed it in its entirety, sounds like they're supposed to anyway,
Correct.
that then those pieces could be salvaged if we saw fit, or if we found it to be.
Well, they may have anticipated that in their pricing of their bid.
Yes, I understand.
And they bid it to demolish, not to dig up, so we have to look at the difference of cost. They bid it with the Sawzall approach.
They
But
bid it
they
with,
still have to withdraw from the ground.
yeah, they wouldn't be removing
Right.
anything, but it would be in a gentle manner.
It almost sounds to me that they would, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that you would come in and just take everything out, and whatever you left behind would just be taken away at that point. Am I incorrect in that? That's from what I understand what you mentioned. Okay. Which would be easier at that point, but I'd be curious to see if that's something we can explore. I know that we're working on it. We talked a few weeks ago, and I appreciate both of you coming out and presenting this as an option. We got time, it sounds like.
Yes, we would be shipping it in a container, and we have, that will probably be whenever necessary. We're not in any hurry to ship the containers. So we've shipped, how many containers?
14.
14 containers to Haiti in the past, so it would be shipped in a
And we have a
container.
Rotary
so-
grant right now to ship, well, what we got from California wouldn't fill a fifth of a container.
Okay.
You have my email. If you have any questions, let us know.
And I'm assuming if there is a legal liability concern, is there a release that could be written on that?
I don't know the answer to the first question, so I can't answer that question.
Okay. I just don't know if I see the concern, but that's just me. If it's not taken apart by us and it's donated as is, I'm just kind of curious on that, but I look forward to hearing.
Sounds like we have some time anyway, because this
Right.
is June, so.
Absolutely.
And we will continue asking the contractor regarding salvage value, like what that could mean to their bid pricing.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Keep you
much.
updated. So next item we have is regarding the bike path update along the river. I know in the PrAC meeting there were some questions on that, and thought we'd bring that up.
Yes, so the second item, I think I labeled it item 7 on the handout to correspond with your agenda. Tetra Tech is currently getting ready to submit to the city/ODOT Stage 1 plans. Those are due November 4th of this year. And I've also attached the actual ODOT schedule. This is an ODOT project because of the funding source, or one of the funding sources being a ODOT grant. So we have to comply with their, I'll call it, rigorous schedule. So if you note here, the stage 3 plans, which are essentially the final plans, are due to them December 1st of 2023. And they anticipate a sale date of May of 2024 because of these steps that have to occur in between the design of the actual bid documents versus right-of-way certification, environmental clearance, and a couple other steps. I have asked the city engineer if they can talk to our design firm, that the design firm is able to complete certain milestones sooner rather than later, what that could look like in terms of condensing the schedule, and if ODOT would be interested in manipulating the schedule if Tetra Tech can meet those deadlines and get the environmental clearances and the right-of-way certification completed. So I will try and keep this committee updated if there's any movement in that schedule. A little disappointing, I know, but unfortunately with that funding source, as I said, there's a very rigorous process.
It's nice to have the detailed schedule here at this point, so that way we can answer the questions a little easier. All right, any conversation on that, or?
Nope.
Next item is Davis Overlook. So during the course of some conversations that I had, I noticed that Davis Overlook was not zoned a park, and was curious on that to see if that's something that we should look at maybe some changes to add some more amenities down there to make it a more usable park.
And I mentioned in just my little paragraph that at the time that that city-owned property was renovated, cleared, excavated, whatever you want to call it, was when Columbia Gas came to the city and asked if they could access that property as a point for them to replace one of their high pressure transmission gas lines that went underneath the Maumee River. We hadn't identified that property as a park because it was zone scenic, and hence the name Davis Overlook versus Davis Park. And I did look back through my emails, sorry IT manager for keeping emails this long, but back in 2015, 2016, the mayor at the time asked PrAC for some suggested names for that scenic area. I believe they gave 2 or 3 suggested names. I know that Davis Overlook was the #1 suggestion, and that City Council passed a resolution officially naming it a scenic with that name because it was a scenic area. We took a look at some floodplain maps today, and almost that entire property is wholly within a floodplain, the FEMA floodplain. Not that that's good, bad, or indifferent, but if the city were to consider rezoning that a park, we have to keep in mind that we would have to follow all the FEMA guidelines and make sure we had flood insurance for any structure that would be interested to be erected on that property to make sure it would stand the test of time, because the lowland out by the river does, I believe, flood most years, and there's usually a lot of debris, logs that come up. In fact, I think one of our projects right now in utilities is cleaning up a drainage ditch that runs along the west side of our property up to State Route 65, because it does fill up quite frequently with large logs coming in off the river. But there wasn't a lot of history that I could dig up other than this.
Is there any benefit in having that conversation to turn into a park? I mean, is any of those land usable that we might be able to put
what I can do
structured
is,
restrooms, anything?
I did bring the FEMA maps, and I have our city engineer seeing if he can get a more granular view of this to see at what intervals or levels the contours were taken for these maps. So this is a FIR map from FEMA, and everything that's shaded in that light blue is in the floodplain, and this is our parcel right here. There's the parking lot. So we are pretty much wholly in the floodplain except for the steep sloping hill that is hanging out there. I think helped planted at one point in time with the wildflowers. But we're going to see if we can get a more granular view of this map to see how far the floodplain is, that it goes as it goes up the hillside, what the high water mark is at different points to see what might be acceptable to be installed or erected there that would be on harm's way. And we can do some more digging into this.
How's the usability of the park? Have we seen a lot of usage, a lot of having to change trash cans, anything like that? Or?
Typically during walleye season, I mean, it's usually full every day. Down there, I have not heard complaints, and I have to turn to Mr. Ross regarding garbage.
Fishing season comes right around.
You know, if you go by there
really
during
accessible, really offer pedestrians, and
no, we don't. We cut paths out to the river itself, but there's nothing that's paved other than that parking lot that Columbia Gas installed on our for us in exchange for utilizing our property.
And what I mean by pedestrians as well is pedestrians trying to walk up to the park. And
correct.
there's just not easy access, and I'm wondering if even scenic overlook, or however we want to call it, you know, it is one of the parks that is on the more western side of the community as well. And if there's things, or it's not a park, but I'll have to work on that terminology.
Yes.
But I do think that is something that, you know, as we look into it to see if there's something more we can develop with that, make it more accessible.
I can certainly look, because I don't know that since State Route 65 is a state route, I don't know that we have any actual right-of-way. So the right-of-way that might be along there might be state right-of-way, but I can double check that, because I know at one point it was the desire of the last city engineer to try and find a way on the north side of State Route 65 near the fort to try and traverse farther west along State Route 65 to at least get over to the Spaffer House and also to our property. But I think he ran into the snag that, you know, that's a drainage swale right there, and it wasn't besides the draining swale, the topography is very sharp rising. And I don't think that there was the ability to put in a multi-use path and or a 5-foot sidewalk. But I can go back and ask our current engineer to take a look at that.
Okay, so I know that we are looking at a multi-use path along Fort Meigs Road, and that would be a nice conjunction to have. Personally, I think it would be nice to have all of our
For the connectivity.
parks and recreational areas connected in some way that people can traverse, bike to, run to, walk to, and get more utilization out of it, because that is a hidden gem of our area, and if there's more that we can do for it, I think that's something we should look at, and I would enjoy hearing more at another meeting about what
I
we
will
can
ask,
potentially do down there.
I'll ask the city engineer between now and your next committee meeting.
Okay.
See what they can find out.
Okay.
And my 2 cents are that I've enjoyed it as a passive park, a scenic park, and not necessarily one that we typically think in terms of parks. One similar to what I'm hopeful we can do at McKinley, kind of a walking, wooded, passive park. But even though it's not a park,
Yeah.
a passive
Area.
area.
But I think we need to get some ways that pedestrians can access.
That's going to be hard
Yeah.
for reasons that.
And I'm curious to see the issue with that, what we might be able to do.
Absolutely.
with that, so. But no, all right. And anything else for that one? Or?
No.
Next item on my agenda, this is something that I requested to be on here. It's titled Park Donations. But looking through some of the stuff with Metro Parks, I'm curious to find out, and I know you have some information on here, about the current practices within the city on accepting donations for our recreational park systems. I know the Metro Parks have different donation levels that individuals can do to, one that sticks out to me was a person can donate $3,000 to name a park bench. It has a finite limit on that, I think 15 years. In 15 years they can renew that, or that someone else can come in and donate to name that bench, because benches have to be replaced over time. And they can't stay there permanently, as we noted about our grants for the Wood County Park District. So I'll pass this on to you to talk about our current practices.
Okay, so current practice, my recollection and some conversation over time with Rob Ross, is that typically somebody is coming to us, typically a family, asking if they could purchase a bench, a tree, something of that nature for the city to place in one of our parks on behalf of one of their family members. And so the city typically purchases that item to make sure that it's, we have typically some standardized products that we use throughout our parks to make sure it's of the right quality. And we also obtain a donator plaque, and the city simply, or the family is simply reimbursing the city for that item, that object. I talked to the finance director a little bit about this the other day, because she had mentioned donations in a different conversation, in a different context. She's done some research, and we are able to accept donations. Turns out we need to have passage of legislation by the city council, even if it's for somebody who would like to purchase a tree on behalf of a family member placed in one of our parks. So that's something internally we have to readjust our thinking on. But that's kind of been the basis of it up to this point. And Rob may be able to chime in, and even Ms. Hagan out in the audience has probably been party to helping assist families select a bench, select a tree that's been planted in one of our parks or placed in one of our parks. And I think typically the plaque stays on that item for evermore.
Riverside primarily has done recently. The park has put quite a few benches now in donation in memory of. Most of those are still on.
And the other option is when we did the bicentennial trees around Woodlands path, those were direct donations for that tree and that plaque.
When those Christmas trees were donated, we ended up planting those somewhere, did we not?
Yes, we planted in various places around the park.
And
We don't plaque those.
we do not plaque those. So it would be for those.
It was the bicentennial tree project in 2016. Those are the only trees that are flagged.
So to make sure I heard correctly as well, we might need to pass something in order to start accepting donations moving forward.
Correct.
Okay. So I would be, I think that's going to be the first step. And a second step, and this is something for us to talk on a future recreation committee meeting, is maybe having some discussions. I know we have park benches at Riverside about some other opportunities to donate. I know Frank has come up with some ideas and suggestions of items that Frank would like to see within the parks. If there's ways that we can come up with some plans that can help us on funding of different things within the park, or creating donations of not maybe more than just the bench, but those funds go specifically into park improvement funds as a way to increase the usability and amenities that we can add to the parks through private donations. I think would be a nice benefit as well. I know people want to invest in the community, and this is an easy way to invest in the community, to our park system, to make it livable and more family oriented. So that's just my thoughts. I think it's something that we could look at moving forward. Ford Imagination was a prime example of a major donation that happened within the city, and I know, and Woodland Place was another one. They didn't donate directly to the city, but it was a project that individuals came up with, and why not have some other ways to do that? And Rotary had a similar way of doing it with the pickleball courts, where they donate the funds, I believe, to the city, and the city managed the project.
Yes, they will be donating funds to the city.
Yeah, so we need to have some conversation again.
Unless I missed a check.
Yeah.
And then Jonathan, the other thing is when the Eagle Scouts do their projects there in the park, they have a special Eagle Scout plaque that is put on them. For example, that's the Gaga pit and the flag disposal unit and a couple of the kiosks, the informational kiosks down at Davis and the kayak rack at Three Meadows. And they have their special Boy Scout Eagle Scout project plaque or signifies that it was an Eagle Scout.
So are they kind of an authorized donor? Because they seem to be doing it on a regular basis.
Well, it's an Eagle Scout project. They come and present it to us or to public service and basically say, yeah, we need that, or no, that's not something that would be useful in a park.
So going forward, we will make sure that we bring future donations for parks through the rec committee, through council, now that we are aware of certain pieces of Ohio Revised Code. And I can also reach out to Days Inc. Over at the Metro Parks and talk to them more about their donation system.
Yeah, I'd just like to see it be easier that people know that they can donate and find some ways that we can utilize that to add in additional things to our park system. I think that one thing that Perrysburg has is a great recreation and park system, better than some of the other communities in the area. Thinking more of the one that decided to go down to 1 lane or 2 lanes for their downtown, but that's a whole other conversation. And I think that there's a lot of people that want to donate to these, or to at least help out in certain ways. The more we can facilitate that, the better. So that's just my 2 cents on why I want to bring this up as a conversation. Any other comments on this? Because I had to pick up my daughter from dance. And I hate to try to cut this too short, but this was, I'll just give a quick background on this one. I know I participated in the action, but more of a thought process. I was approached by a couple of individuals with a couple different organizations in the community, again, about our lack of difficulty I know the service is going through, the city's going through with field space, trying to make sure that there's enough field space out there and usable, and it's almost near impossible to achieve it all. One of the suggestions that was approached to me on is the possibility of looking at lighting of Rotary Park to allow for there to be longer field usage in the evening. Right now it is pitch black out, but there's still soccer going on, lacrosse, football, rugby, all of that stuff can move on and continue moving into the evening. That's an area that is not really surrounded by residential, so it's not as impactful for the light pollution. I think that that's something that might be a good idea to explore, to see about. And I do know as well with our users of our fields, trying to schedule
Those, I believe we use PABSC scheduled baseball diamonds. Do you tie us up to speak about?
So this little group is something that we maintain in the mayor's office. And it's kind of a compilation of assistants from the law director, service director, myself, and Elaine, who keeps all of the street. And so this is kind of like the master schedule for all of the field space that we allow organized nonprofits to not rent or lease, but to preserve. And the goal has always been to get as many City of Perrysburg folks and associations on the fields as possible, but at the same time not overusing the fields. So it's kind of been like a standing practice to, on any given field, to not have more than 4 nights of usage on it at any given time. Understanding that there could be anything from a soccer tops group that's not going to do field damage because they're not using cleats versus an adult soccer league or team or rugby that may have cleats. But this just kind of outlines for your review. So we work directly with anybody from Perrysburg Soccer Club, Perrysburg Youth Soccer, PABSC, Perrysburg Rugby, Perrysburg High School, Ohio Lightning Lacrosse, Soccer Shots, 5-Tool Baseball, St. Rose, Vault Health, GTFC, Perrysburg Women's Softball, Fit Mamas who does yoga, a group out of Columbus Club called S2N, Columbus Sharks, Vital Vibes Yoga, and a Rossford Dome, and an NFL Flag Football League. And we try to accommodate everybody who's come forward looking for field space to the best of our ability. Luckily, a couple of organizations that came to us last year didn't come to us this year, so we were able to get some folks on who hadn't been able to be accommodated in the past. But it does get challenging, and then there's always the battle of who gets preference over who, how many Perrysburg kids do they have, how many Perrysburg resident kids do they have versus how many Perrysburg zip code kids do they have versus Perrysburg school system. So it does get kind of complicated, but we try to do our best to spread everybody out and also not overuse the field so that they have a chance to rest.
I know we have the new system for the recreation program. Is that something that we can utilize for this moving forward? Or is that...
This involves larger agreements
okay.
Because there's a lot of liability documents. They have to be signed by each entity. They have to provide insurance certificates. But it's something we can see if there's a way to entertain a request through that versus finalizing all the paperwork.
I would see that with how these are broken off, that there could be opportunities where the fields aren't being used during a certain time, and that an entity might be able to come in.
It's possible. One of the challenges is that everybody typically wants to use the fields right after school.
Yeah.
So that's always a challenge, or they want to use them on weekends when everybody's not working or in school.
Yeah.
So you're really looking at just a couple times that are compressed for most groups, and so we try to make the most of the field space. I mean, we're using everything from green space over at Municipal Park to even Orleans Park, which is not the most ideal because there's not really a flat field surface over there. It's kind of rolling, undulating, but we try to make the most of it.
This is something that we'll probably have to discuss moving forward because.
I just have a question, I guess, for Bridget. You mentioned a couple of entities on there that are businesses like Vault and the yoga company. Do they pay a fee to use the property?
No, none of these organizations are paying a fee to use the property, with the exception of PABSC. Their agreement requires them to split certain components of revenue that they receive, like through advertising and or I think a couple different tournaments. But other than that, nobody is paying any fee to use any city property.
Is there a reason why not? If these businesses are making money by holding classes on city property?
Do we ask them to provide insurance?
Yes.
Insurance? Okay, so that's it. They're making money
These
out of
other
it.
groups as well?
Yes.
Every single group on here has a contract.
That's one of the reasons why I think it would be good to look at the rec system we have as a possibility that if they can register on there, we might be able to look at that as a way to it's something that I want us to explore, I guess is the best way to put it.
Because I'm wondering, like, if there's a group, like a yoga group using Riverside Park down at the bottom, does that mean that someone else can't walk around down there while they're doing their class?
I've gone for a run and ran across it and realized they were there one time.
I'm just curious. Thank you.
And this is something I want us to continue to talk about here moving forward. I know I'm kind of tight for time here myself personally. So if we don't mind, I would love to have this on the upcoming agenda to have some more conversation. I know we'll be talking about the budget next meeting. I think this might be a good thing to have in conjunction with that. And then, is there anything else that you might have to add for?
This is informative, so thanks for putting it together. Never seen this spreadsheet.
We use it all the time, especially late winter, early spring.
And then in other business, there's something I was going to mention for PrAC, and I can't remember what it. PrAC had mentioned about the summer rec programs, and they made another suggestion on adding officiating as in teaching high school kids how to be officials, maybe doing something in conjunction with the, was it OH?
OHS, I did.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, just because there's such a need for officials, and looking at this map, or this breakdown, all those entities need officials, and high school kids can't officiate a lot of those younger groups.
We will float that to the rec director and assistant director.
It might be, I think the conversation came up what we can do to give benefit to some of the older kids that may not see that, and that might be something to give to do. I actually remember taking a course like that over the summer when I was in high school, and I brought some little kid soccer games. I don't remember the age, I just remember going out there and doing it, and it was fun.
Well, I think there are organizations that teach officiating. I don't know where they are, and Rob, maybe you can enlighten us some later.
Well, there's various ones. For each sport, there's a program for each sport, typically through high school there. That's who provides it, but
we can
I know
facilitate
we've looked into it before. The rec Charles Burgo's looked into it. We can look into it again.
Especially at the adult level, as we know, that's where we're running into real issues.
We do stuff at the high school level. The junior, our players volunteer for the junior jacket program, so they officiate all the basketball games on the weekends. That's how we train.
That's when they learn not to do it when they become older.
No, it's that they carry that on their career and become official.
But I think this might be something to look at. It could be something that could be open to adults that want to take, even though it's a rec program, this might be something that could be a benefit to the community in general. But with that, if there's no objections, I would like to adjourn so that way I can get my daughter so she's not sitting wondering where I'm at.